What would you do if you found a 47-page document proving your husband married you for money? Not just any money. Your estranged billionaire father's money. A fortune you walked away from 10 years ago. And here's the worst part. You are 7 months pregnant with his child. A child he planned. A child he needs. Because according to this document,
not.
your baby
I need the
is
transfer
not a
confirmed
blessing.
by midnight,
Your
or the
baby
deal
is a bargaining
off.
chip. His mistress? She is not just sleeping with your husband. She helped write the plan to steal everything from you. They call it Operation Thornton. And you are listed as the target. Your bank account? Emptied overnight. Your business? Destroyed by fake fraud allegations. Your reputation? Shattered across every news outlet in Texas. You have $3,000 to your name. You are weeks away from giving birth. And the man sleeping beside you every night has been plotting your destruction for 4 years. But here is what they did not count on. They forgot who your father is. They forgot what a mother will do to protect her child. And they definitely forgot that the woman they tried to break has a backbone made of steel. This is the story of Elena Thornton, a woman who lost everything. And then took it all back. Story value and lesson. Before we begin, I want you to know why this story matters. This is not just entertainment. This is a survival guide. 1 in 3 women will experience domestic abuse in their lifetime. And financial abuse, the kind where someone controls your money, steals your savings, and destroys your credit, happens in 99% of those cases. The lesson of this story is simple but powerful. Trust your instincts. When something feels wrong, it probably is. Write it down. Document everything. And never be too proud to ask for help when you need it. This story will teach you how predators operate, how they isolate you, how they gaslight you into doubting your own reality, and most importantly, how to fight back and win. If you are going through something similar, know that you are not alone. And if you are not, this story might help you recognize the signs before it is too late. So stay with me until the end. Because Elena's journey, from victim to victor, contains wisdom that could change your life or save someone you love. What would you do if you discovered your entire marriage was a business plan and you were the product? I want you to picture this scene with me. A woman stands alone in the rain outside a courthouse in Austin, Texas. The October sky is the color of ash. Water streams down her face, mixing with mascara until black rivers carve paths down her cheeks. She is 7 months pregnant. Her belly strains against a maternity dress that cost $400, a dress she bought because she wanted to look strong for the judge. In her trembling palm, she holds a wedding ring. $12,000 worth of platinum and diamonds. A ring she now knows was purchased with money stolen from her own savings account. That woman was me. My name is Elena Grace Thornton. I am 32 years old, and this is the story of how I lost everything I thought I had, found everything I actually needed, and made the people who betrayed me pay a price they never saw coming. But to understand how I ended up standing in that rain, we need to go back. 6 months back. To the night I thought was the happiest of my life. Our house sat on a quiet street in the Terrytown neighborhood of Austin. It was not a mansion. I had grown up in mansions, and I wanted nothing to do with them anymore. This was a 4-bedroom craftsman built in 1923 with original hardwood floors that I had spent 3 months restoring by hand. The kitchen had subway tile backsplash that I installed myself. The garden out back grew tomatoes and basil and the roses my mother used to love. I was an interior designer, a successful one. I had built my business from nothing over 10 years, and that house represented everything I had accomplished on my own terms. Every room told the story of who I had chosen to become, separate from my family name, separate from my father's money, separate from all the expectations that had suffocated me as a child. That night, Marcus and I were celebrating our third wedding anniversary. He had made reservations at Uchi, the Japanese restaurant downtown, where we had our first date. But I asked him to cancel. I had news that could not wait for a crowded restaurant. I remember standing in our kitchen, watching him pour 2 glasses of sparkling cider. The evening light came through the window and caught the gray at his temples, making it shine like silver thread. He did not know yet why I had requested cider instead of champagne. Marcus Hayes was the kind of handsome that made other women look twice in grocery stores, then pretend they had not looked at all. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on magazine covers. Green eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, creating little fans of lines that made him look wise and warm at the same time. At 38 years old, he was the CEO of Hayes Innovations, a green technology company that had been featured in Forbes twice and had raised over $200 million in venture capital. Everyone who met Marcus walked away impressed. He had that gift. The ability to make you feel like you were the most important person in the room, like he was genuinely fascinated by whatever you had to say. I had fallen in love with him because he seemed so different from the wealthy men I had grown up around. Those men wore their privilege like armor. They expected the world to bend to their will because it always had. But Marcus had come from nothing: foster care, group homes. He had aged out of the system at 18 with nothing but the clothes on his back and a determination to never be powerless again. He had built himself from scratch, just like I was trying to do, or at least that is what I believed at the time. Marcus handed me my glass of cider and raised his own. His smile was warm. His eyes were soft. The kitchen smelled like the rosemary chicken I had made for dinner. And somewhere in the distance, I could hear our neighbor's dog barking at a squirrel. It was such an ordinary moment. Such a perfect, ordinary moment. Marcus said, "Happy third anniversary to the woman who made me believe in second chances. I spent 30 years thinking I was not meant to have a family. Then I met you, and everything changed. I love you, Elena, more than I have ever loved anything. I love you too," I replied. My voice was shaking. I could feel tears building behind my eyes. "And I have something to tell you." He set down his glass immediately, giving me his full attention. That was something I had always loved about Marcus. When he looked at you, you felt like the only person in the world, like nothing else existed except this moment, this conversation, this connection between two people. I took a deep breath. The words I was about to say would change everything. I knew that. I just did not know how much. "Marcus," I said, "I am pregnant." The reaction was everything I had dreamed of. His eyes went wide. His mouth fell open. For a long moment, he just stared at me, like he could not process what I had said. Then tears spilled down his cheeks, actual tears, and he crossed the kitchen in 2 strides and swept me into his arms. "Are you serious?" he whispered against my hair. His voice cracked on the words. "Please tell me you are serious." I nodded against his chest, crying now too. 5 weeks along. I found out this morning. I took 4 tests, just to be sure. He pulled back to look at my face, his hands cupping my cheeks. His thumbs wiped away my tears, even as his own kept falling. "Elena," he said, "this is the best anniversary gift you could have ever given me. I am going to be a father. We are going to be parents." We stood there, in our kitchen, for what felt like hours, holding each other, crying together, dreaming about the future, about nursery colors and baby names, and whether our child would have his green eyes or my brown ones, about first steps and first words, and teaching them to ride a bicycle. It was perfect. It was everything I had ever wanted. And it was all a lie. I did not know it then, but Marcus had known I was pregnant before I did. His assistant had intercepted my pharmacy records and flagged the prenatal vitamins I had purchased 3 weeks earlier. He had been waiting for me to confirm what he already knew. Because my pregnancy was not a surprise to Marcus Hayes. It was not a gift or a blessing or a miracle. It was phase 2 of his plan. That night, after we made love slowly and tenderly, Marcus fell asleep with his hand resting on my still flat stomach. I lay awake for a while, watching the shadows move across our bedroom ceiling, feeling more content than I had felt in years. Then I woke up at 2 in the morning to an empty bed. The sheets beside me were cold, which meant Marcus had been gone for a while. I pulled on my robe and padded through the dark house, following the faint sound of his voice. I found him on the balcony off our master bedroom. He stood with his back to me, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and urgent. The city lights of Austin sparkled in the distance, like earth-bound stars. Through the glass door, I heard him say, "This changes the timeline. We need to accelerate. The asset is secured." I stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of the words. Asset? Timeline? What was he talking about? But I was tired. So tired. The pregnancy was already affecting my sleep, and my brain felt wrapped in cotton wool. I assumed it was work. Marcus was always working. His company was in the middle of a major expansion, negotiating contracts with 3 different cities for solar panel installations. He often took calls at odd hours, especially when dealing with partners in different time zones. So I went back to bed. I pulled the covers over my head and told myself it was nothing. I told myself a lot of things in those early weeks. I told myself that the distance I sometimes felt between us was normal. All marriages had rough patches. I told myself that the way he checked his phone constantly was just the pressure of being a CEO, that the new password on his devices was standard security protocol for someone in his position. I told myself that the man I married was exactly who he claimed to be. Looking back, I can see how desperately I wanted to believe, how hard I worked to explain away every red flag, every warning sign, every whisper of intuition that something was wrong. My therapist once told me that when someone shows you who they are at 2 in the morning, you should believe them. When they think no one is watching, when their guard is down, that is when you see the truth. I wish I had listened. But here's the thing about being in love. It makes you want to believe. It makes you rationalize and excuse and explain away because the alternative is too painful to consider. The alternative means admitting that the life you built, the future you imagined, the person you trusted with your heart, none of it was real. And I was so deeply, desperately in love with the man I thought Marcus was. I just did not know yet that man had never existed. The weeks after my pregnancy announcement should have been magical. In many ways, they appeared to be. Marcus was attentive in ways he had never been before. He rubbed my feet when they swelled at the end of long days. He went to every doctor's appointment, holding my hand during the ultrasounds, tearing up when we heard our baby's heartbeat for the first time. He started researching the safest car seats and the best prenatal vitamins and the top-rated cribs. He even started a Pinterest board called Baby Hayes, filled with nursery ideas and organic baby clothes and articles about attachment parenting. Everyone told me how lucky I was. My clients commented on how supportive he seemed. My friends said they wished their husbands were half as involved. But there were cracks in the facade, small ones at first, easy to dismiss if you were not looking closely, like the business trip to Portland when Hayes Innovations had no office in Portland and no clients there that I knew of. Marcus said it was a preliminary meeting with potential investors who preferred discretion. I did not question it. Or the $15,000 charge on our credit card for consulting fees to a company I had never heard of. When I asked about it, Marcus laughed and kissed my forehead and said it was just routine business expenses. These things happen when you are scaling a company, he told me. Do not worry your pretty head about it. Do not worry your pretty head. I should have noticed how condescending that was, how dismissive. But I was too busy being grateful that he had an explanation at all. Then there was the phone. Marcus had never used a password on his devices before. He said he had nothing to hide, that secrets were poison to a marriage. But sometime around my 8th week of pregnancy, I noticed he had added a passcode. When I asked about it, he said his security team had insisted. Standard protocol for someone handling sensitive business information. It made sense. It all made sense when he explained it. That was what he was good at, making things make sense, turning my legitimate concerns into evidence of my own paranoia. I was 12 weeks pregnant when I decided to mention my concerns to the one person who had always given me straight answers, even when I did not want to hear them. Delia Washington had been my nanny when I was a child. She was the only person from my old life that I still talked to. After my mother died and I cut ties with my father, Delia was the one thread connecting me to who I used to be. She was 58 years old now, with silver streaking through her black hair and laugh lines carved deep around her mouth. She had left domestic service years ago and opened a diner on the east side of Austin called Delia's Place. The building was nothing special, just a converted Dairy Queen with mismatched furniture and a hand-painted sign out front. But the food was extraordinary. Her pecan pie had won awards. Her fried chicken had been featured in Texas Monthly. More importantly, her advice was always worth hearing, even when it made you uncomfortable. I sat at my usual booth near the back, picking at a slice of pie I did not really want. Delia refilled my decaf coffee without being asked and slid into the booth across from me. "All right," she said, "spill it. You have been pushing that pie around for 20 minutes, and you look like someone kicked your puppy." I sighed. "I do not know. I feel like I am going crazy." Crazy? How? I told her about the little things. The phone password, the unexplained charges, the business trips that did not quite add up, the way Marcus sometimes looked at his phone and then deleted whatever he had been reading before I could see it. "I feel paranoid," I admitted, "like I am looking for problems that are not there." "He is so good to me, Delia. He is excited about the baby. He is present and attentive and everything a husband should be. But something is bothering you," Delia said. "Something in your gut," I nodded miserably. "I think it is just the hormones. My doctor said pregnancy can cause anxiety and mood swings. Maybe I am just imagining things." Delia set down her coffee cup and fixed me with a look that I remembered from childhood. The look that meant she was about to say something I needed to hear, but probably did not want to. "Honey," she said, "I have been married 3 times. You know what I learned from all those failed marriages? That marriage is sacred." She snorted so hard, coffee almost came out her nose. "Lord, no. I learned that when a man changes his phone password out of nowhere, he ain't hiding a surprise birthday party." Men are simple creatures, Elena. They do not complicate things unless they have something to hide. I started to protest, but she held up her hand. "I am not saying he is cheating," she continued. "I am saying something is going on. And your gut knows it, even if your brain does not want to accept it. You want my advice?" I nodded. "Check his Apple Watch. Men always forget the watch syncs everything. They put passwords on their phones and their laptops, but they forget about that little thing on their wrist. If there is something to find, you will find it there." I laughed and told her she was being ridiculous. Marcus loved me. We were having a baby together. I was just being hormonal and paranoid. But later that night, after dinner, when Marcus was taking a shower, I found myself standing over his nightstand. His Apple Watch sat there, charging. The screen was dark. I should have walked away. I should have trusted my husband and ignored Delia's cynical advice. Instead, I picked up the watch and tapped the screen. What I found there changed everything. Text messages, dozens of them, to someone saved in his contacts as just the letter T. The messages were explicit, graphic, the kind of messages that left no room for innocent interpretation. One message in particular burned itself into my memory. It was from 3 days ago, right around the time Marcus said he had a late meeting with investors. The message said, "Cannot wait to see you tomorrow. The usual suite at the Driscoll. Wear the red dress. I have been thinking about you all week." I put the watch down, very carefully, exactly where I had found it. I walked to the bathroom, I closed the door, and I vomited until there was nothing left in my stomach but bile and betrayal. Then I washed my face. I looked at myself in the mirror, and I made a decision. I would not confront him, not yet, not until I understood the full scope of what was happening, not until I had more information, because that message had mentioned the usual suite, which meant this was not new. This was ongoing. This had been happening for God knows how long. I needed to know everything before I said a word. So, I cleaned my face. I put on my nightgown. I climbed into bed beside my husband and pretended to be asleep when he came out of the shower, smelling like soap and steam. I did not confront him the next day either, or the day after that. Part of me hoped I had misunderstood, that there was some explanation that would make the messages innocent. Maybe T was a colleague he was flirting with as a joke. Maybe it was an old thread he had forgotten to delete. But another part of me, the wiser part, knew better. I was just not ready to face it yet. Instead, I watched. I paid attention. I noticed things I had trained myself to ignore. The way his face softened when certain texts came through. The way he angled his body away from me when he typed responses. The increasing frequency of late nights at the office. Early morning meetings. Weekend emergencies that required his immediate attention. A week after I found those messages, I decided to test him. Not a confrontation, just a gentle probe to see how he would respond. We were eating breakfast when I asked, casual as could be, "Is everything okay at work? You seem stressed lately." I watched his face carefully, looking for any flicker of guilt, any tell that might reveal the truth. What I got instead was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Marcus set down his coffee cup. He reached across the table and took my hand. His eyes were soft with concern and love and gratitude. "You noticed," he said. "I am sorry, sweetheart. I have been so caught up in this deal that I have been neglecting you. That is going to change, starting right now." What deal? A potential partnership with a European firm. Very hush-hush. I cannot really talk about the details until the paperwork is signed. But it has been consuming all my attention, and that is not fair to you. You and this baby are my whole world, Elena. I need you to know that. He spent the entire week after that conversation showering me with attention. Flowers delivered to my office every day. Surprise foot rubs when I got home. Love notes left on the bathroom mirror. A weekend getaway to a spa in Fredericksburg where we soaked in mineral baths and talked about baby names. He told me he loved me constantly. He could not keep his hands off my growing belly. He started reading parenting books out loud to me before bed. By the end of that week, I had convinced myself that I had overreacted. The messages must have been from before we met. Some old flame whose texts he had never bothered to delete. Marcus loved me. He was devoted to our family. The evidence was right in front of me every single day. I deleted what I had seen from my memory. I focused on the nursery planning and the baby shower invitations and the future I was so sure we were building together. It would be another month before I learned the full truth, and when I did, it would destroy me in ways I did not know a person could be destroyed. By my 7th month of pregnancy, I had almost forgotten about the messages on Marcus's watch. Almost. The memory lingered at the edges of my consciousness like a half-remembered nightmare. Sometimes I would catch myself watching Marcus type on his phone, wondering who he was talking to. Sometimes I would wake up at 3 in the morning and find his side of the bed empty, and for a moment, the fear would grip my chest so tight I could not breathe. But then he would come back with a glass of water or a gentle explanation about insomnia, and I would push the fear back down where it belonged, in the locked box of things I was not ready to face. The Hayes Innovations annual charity gala was scheduled for the 3rd weekend in September. I did not want to go. My ankles were swollen to twice their normal size. My back ached constantly. The baby had dropped low in my pelvis, which meant I had to pee every 20 minutes, and walking more than a block left me exhausted. All I wanted was to stay home with a heating pad and a pint of ice cream and a documentary about something soothing like ocean life or baking competitions. But Marcus was insistent. "I need you there, Elena," he said. "This is the biggest night of the year for the company. We are announcing our partnership with Green Tech Europe, and there will be press and investors and politicians. Having my beautiful pregnant wife by my side shows everyone that I am a family man, someone they can trust with their money and their city contracts." He smoothed his hand over my belly and smiled that smile that used to make my knees weak. "Besides," he added, "you designed the event space. The whole ballroom is your vision. Do you really want to miss seeing everyone's reaction?" That was the argument that convinced me. I had spent 3 months designing the transformation of the old railroad warehouse into a glittering gala venue. The centerpieces, the lighting, the way the space would flow from cocktails to dinner to dancing. It was one of the biggest projects of my career. So I squeezed myself into a custom maternity gown that cost more than my first car. Navy blue silk that made my skin glow and my eyes pop. I spent 2 hours on my hair and makeup, trying to look elegant instead of exhausted, and I smiled until my face ached as Marcus worked the room, introducing me to investors and city council members and tech executives who shook my hand and told me how lucky Marcus was. That was the night I met Victoria Sinclair. She was standing by the champagne tower when I first noticed her, tall and willowy, with honey blonde hair, swept up in an elegant twist. She wore a red dress that probably cost $5,000, and it fit her like it had been sewn directly onto her body. Her bone structure was the kind photographers fall in love with: high cheekbones, a jawline sharp enough to cut glass, eyes the color of pale jade that swept the room like she was cataloging everyone in it. I recognized her name when Marcus introduced us: Victoria Sinclair, Chief Operating Officer of Hayes Innovations. I had heard Marcus mention her in passing, always professionally. "Our COO is handling that. Victoria has the numbers. Let me check with Victoria and get back to you." But this was our first time meeting face to face. Something about her set me on edge immediately. I could not pinpoint it. She smiled and said all the right things, but there was something behind her eyes that did not match the warmth of her words. A calculation, an assessment. When she looked at me, I felt like I was being measured for a casket. "Elena," she said, "it is so lovely to finally meet the woman behind the man. Marcus talks about you constantly. I feel like I already know you." Her hand touched my arm, just briefly, just lightly, but something about it felt like a claim being staked. "All good things, I hope," I replied. I was trying to keep my voice light, but my heart was beating too fast. Victoria laughed. The sound was musical and hollow at the same time, like wind chimes made of glass. "Oh, of course," she said. "He is absolutely devoted to you. Anyone can see that." Her eyes flicked down to my pregnant belly, and something shifted in her expression. Just for a moment, just long enough for me to notice. Then she was smiling again, excusing herself to greet some investors, leaving me standing there with a strange chill running down my spine. I excused myself to use the bathroom. I needed a moment away from the noise and the lights and the uncomfortable feeling that had settled in my chest like a stone. But I never made it to the bathroom. The hallway outside the ballroom was quieter than the main event space. My heels clicked against the marble floor as I walked, one hand pressed to my lower back, where the ache had settled in permanently. That was when I heard Victoria's voice. It came from an alcove near the service entrance, a small space behind a potted palm where she must have thought she was hidden from view. She was on the phone, her voice low but intense. I should have kept walking. I should have minded my own business and found the bathroom and gone back to smiling for the cameras. Instead, I pressed myself against the wall and listened. "She is bigger than a house," Victoria was saying. Her tone was dismissive, cruel. 7 months along, and she still does not know. Marcus has her completely fooled. The woman walks around like she won the lottery, and she does not even realize she is the prize, not the winner. My blood turned to ice. Victoria continued. "Once the baby is born and we have leverage on the Thornton Trust, we file for divorce and take everything. The timing has to be perfect. We need the child as a bargaining chip before we make any moves." I stopped breathing. Thornton Trust. I had not heard that name spoken aloud in 10 years. Not since I walked out of my father's house and swore I would never look back. There are only a handful of Thorntons in Texas with a trust worth mentioning. Only one whose trust would be significant enough to warrant this kind of scheming. Me. I am William Thornton's only child. My father is the oil and technology billionaire whose name adorns buildings and hospital wings and university lecture halls across Austin. When I was born, a trust was established in my name worth more money than most people could spend in 100 lifetimes. But I had walked away from all of it. I had legally changed my name to Grace, my mother's maiden name, when I was 22 years old. I had built my entire identity around being self-made, around proving that I did not need my father's money or his connections or his approval. I had never told Marcus about my family, never mentioned the Thornton name or the trust or any of it. As far as he knew, I was exactly what I appeared to be, a successful interior designer from a middle-class background who had worked hard to build her own business. How did Victoria know who I really was? How did Marcus know? And what did she mean by leverage on the trust? Victoria was still talking into her phone. "The fool thinks he is playing me, but I am 3 steps ahead. Once we have the divorce settlement, once we have access to the Thornton money through the child, Marcus Hayes becomes disposable. He served his purpose. Now I need someone with more ambition." I could not listen anymore. My hands were shaking so badly that I knocked into the potted palm as I backed away. The leaves rustled. Victoria stopped talking. I did not wait to see if she had noticed me. I moved as fast as my pregnant body would allow, back toward the ballroom, back toward the lights and the music and the crowd of people who had no idea that my entire world was collapsing. Marcus was on stage when I reached the ballroom. He stood behind a podium, delivering a speech about corporate responsibility and sustainable innovation. The crowd hung on his every word. He was charismatic and sincere and passionate about the future he was building. Looking at him, you would never guess that he was a con artist, a predator, A man who had targeted me specifically because of my family name and spent years pretending to love me so he could steal my inheritance. I wanted to scream. I wanted to climb onto that stage and tell everyone what I had heard. I wanted to expose him right there, in front of the investors and the journalists and the politicians who thought he was so trustworthy. But I did not. I stood in the back of the ballroom, my hand on my pregnant belly, and I waited. After the gala ended, after the last guests had departed, and the catering staff had begun cleaning up, I told Marcus we needed to talk. He was riding the high of a successful event. His eyes were bright. His smile was wide. He had no idea what was coming. At home, in our beautiful living room, with the windows overlooking Austin, I confronted him. I heard a conversation tonight, I said. My voice was calmer than I felt. Victoria was on the phone with someone. She mentioned the Thornton Trust. I watched his face carefully, looking for guilt, looking for fear, looking for any sign that would confirm what I already knew. What I got instead was a masterclass in manipulation. Marcus's expression shifted from confusion to concern to gentle amusement, all in the space of a few seconds. You were eavesdropping on my colleagues, he said. It was not a question, more like a weary observation. I heard what she said, Marcus. She talked about using our baby as leverage. She talked about a divorce and taking everything. He sighed heavily and sat down on the couch. He ran his hands through his hair. For a long moment, he did not say anything. Then he looked up at me with eyes full of hurt and disappointment. Elena, he said, this is exactly what I was afraid of. The stress of the pregnancy has been affecting your judgment. You are hearing things out of context and jumping to the worst possible conclusions. She mentioned the Thornton Trust, I repeated. I never told you about my family. How does she know who I am? Because I know, he said simply. I have known for 2 years. The admission hit me like a physical blow. You knew? Marcus nodded slowly. I found your birth certificate when I was looking for our tax documents in the filing cabinet. The one that lists your father as William Thornton. I recognize the name, of course. Everyone in Austin knows who William Thornton is. He stood up and crossed the room to where I stood. He took my hands in his grip warm and steady. I did not say anything, because I know how painful your family situation is, he continued. You never talk about your father. You changed your name. Clearly there is trauma there that you are not ready to address. I was protecting you, Elena, waiting for you to be ready to tell me yourself. But Victoria, I started. Marcus cut me off. Victoria is ambitious. Too ambitious for her own good sometimes. She probably found out somehow. Maybe through a background check for investors or something. I will talk to her about discretion. But Elena, you have to understand, there is no conspiracy here. You are seeing shadows where there are none. What about the leverage? I demanded. What about using our baby as a bargaining chip? He shook his head sadly. I do not know what Victoria was talking about. Maybe she has her own agenda I am not aware of. But I promise you, I married you because I love you. I am having a baby with you because I want to build a family with you. Everything else is just noise. He pulled me into his arms then. He stroked my hair. He whispered reassurances against my temple. While I stood there, rigid and uncertain, I want to believe you, I said finally. Then believe me, he replied. Trust what we have built together. Trust what you know about me. Trust your husband, Elena. And here is the shameful part, the part I am still embarrassed to admit. I did trust him. I let him convince me that I was the problem, that my suspicions were symptoms of pregnancy hormones and anxiety and the stress of organizing a major event. I apologized for eavesdropping. I apologized for jumping to conclusions. I went to bed that night feeling guilty for doubting my husband. That is the thing about gaslighting that nobody warns you about. It is insidious. It does not just make you doubt the other person. It makes you doubt yourself, your own perceptions, your own memories, your own sanity. The most dangerous part of being manipulated is that you become your own worst enemy. The person who should always have your back becomes your harshest critic. If your gut tells you something is wrong, write it down, date it, save it somewhere safe. Because when someone tries to rewrite reality later, you will need proof that you are not crazy, even if the only person you need to convince is yourself. I did not write anything down that night. I did not save any proof. I let my husband convince me that the woman I overheard plotting my destruction was just an ambitious colleague with poor boundaries. I would regret that decision for a very long time. 2 weeks after the charity gala, I went to my doctor for a routine prenatal checkup. Marcus was supposed to come with me. He had promised. But that morning, he got a call from the office about some emergency that required his immediate attention. He kissed my forehead, apologetically, and said he would make it up to me. By then, I had trained myself not to notice the pattern, the constant cancellations, the endless emergencies, the way his work always seemed to take priority over his family. I sat alone in the waiting room of Austin Women's Health, my hand resting on my swollen belly. Around me, other pregnant women leafed through parenting magazines or scrolled through their phones. Several of them had partners beside them, holding hands or rubbing backs or just being present in that simple, important way. I told myself it did not matter. Marcus was busy building a company. He was providing for our family. Not every husband could take time off for every appointment. My phone buzzed with an incoming email. I expected it to be Marcus, apologizing again for missing the appointment. Instead, the sender was an address I did not recognize, a random string of letters and numbers at a domain I had never heard of. The subject line read, "Your husband's real business plan." My heart stuttered in my chest. For a long moment, I just stared at my phone screen. My thumb hovered over the email. Every instinct screamed at me not to open it. Whatever was in there, it would change everything. I could feel it. But I needed to know. After weeks of pushing my suspicions down, after letting Marcus convince me I was crazy, I needed the truth. I opened the email. There was no message in the body, just attachments. Half a dozen files with names like evidence1.jpg and timeline.pdf, and the one that made my stomach drop through the floor. operationthornton.docx. I clicked on the photos first. They showed Marcus and Victoria together in ways that left no room for innocent interpretation. Hotel rooms, restaurant tables with candles and wine, the two of them walking hand in hand through what looked like an airport terminal. The timestamps on the photos spanned 2 years. 2 years. Our entire marriage. I clicked on the timeline document next. It showed the progression of their relationship, cross-referenced with my relationship with Marcus. They had been sleeping together since before our wedding. They had celebrated when I got pregnant. They had toasted with champagne when the paternity test came back positive. Paternity test. They had been tracking my pregnancy since before I even knew I was pregnant. But it was the final attachment that truly destroyed me. Operation Thornton was a 47-page document. It was written in corporate language, the kind of sterile, professional tone that made atrocities sound like business strategy. Phase 1. Identification and approach. Target, Elena Grace, born Elena Thornton. Sole heir to the Thornton fortune, estranged from family, vulnerable due to desire to prove independence. Approach through manufactured meet, cute, at coffee shop. Timeline, 6 months to engagement. I remembered that coffee shop. I remembered Marcus bumping into me and spilling his latte all over my laptop. I remembered how charming he had been, how apologetic, how he had insisted on buying me a new computer and taking me to dinner to make up for the inconvenience. I had thought it was fate, a lucky accident that brought my soulmate into my life. It was a setup, every single moment of it planned and executed like a military operation. Phase 2, marriage and conception. Objective, produce heir to strengthen claim on Thornton Trust. Thornton Trust contains provisions for grandchildren that bypass Elena's ability to refuse an inheritance. Child provides legal avenue to funds regardless of Elena's cooperation. Timeline 1 to 2 years post-marriage. They had planned my pregnancy. They had tracked my ovulation cycles and made sure Marcus was home on the right nights. My baby was not an accident or a blessing. She was a means to an end. Phase 3, divorce and settlement. Upon birth of child, initiate divorce proceedings. Claim primary custody using documented evidence of Elena's mental instability. Negotiate settlement with William Thornton for child's well-being. Estimated return, $50 to $100 million. The document went on, page after page of strategy and contingencies and backup plans. They had prepared for every possible scenario. If I became suspicious, if my father got involved, if the media found out. Phase 4, if Elena becomes problematic, document mental instability. Reference paranoid behavior, isolation from family, emotional volatility during pregnancy. Obtain testimony from colleagues and neighbors regarding erratic conduct. They had been building a case against me for months. Every time I expressed suspicion, Marcus had probably logged it. Every tear I shed, every outburst of frustration, every moment of hormonal overwhelm had been cataloged as evidence that I was unfit to raise my own child. The document was dated 4 years ago. 4 years, before Marcus and I had even met. Before our first date at Uchi, before the proposal under the stars at Big Bend National Park, where I had cried and said yes and thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. Our entire relationship was a con. I was never his wife. I was a target, a mark, a womb to carry the bargaining chip he would use to extort my estranged father. The nurse called my name 3 times before I heard her. Mrs. Hayes? Mrs. Hayes, are you all right? I was not all right. I was on the floor of the waiting room bathroom, my designer maternity dress, soaked with the water I had splashed on my face, my body heaving with sobs I could not control. The nurse found me there. She helped me up, got me water, asked if I needed to call someone. I told her I was fine. Pregnancy hormones, nothing to worry about. Then I went into the exam room and lay on the table while the doctor checked my blood pressure and measured my belly and asked cheerful questions about the nursery and whether I had chosen a name yet. I answered on autopilot, yes, the nursery is almost ready. Yellow and gray, nice and neutral. We are thinking about Lily for a girl, James for a boy. All the while, my mind was screaming. They want my baby as a bargaining chip. They have been planning this since before I even knew Marcus existed. My husband is a monster, and my marriage is a lie, and I am going to lose everything. Then, as if in response to my spiraling thoughts, my baby kicked. A strong kick, right against my ribs. The kind of kick that says, I am here. Do not forget about me. I am real, even if nothing else is. I pressed my hand against the spot where I had felt her move, and in that moment, something shifted inside me. The despair did not disappear, but alongside it, a new feeling emerged. Rage, not the hot, explosive kind of anger that burns out quickly. This was something colder, something more dangerous, the kind of rage that could power a war. They thought they could use me. They thought they could steal my child and extort my family and leave me with nothing. They were wrong. I did not know how yet. I did not know what resources I had or what my strategy would be. I just knew with absolute certainty that I would not let them win over my dead body. I did not go home after my doctor's appointment. I could not face Marcus. could not lie beside him in our bed and pretend everything was normal, while my mind raced through the implications of what I had learned. Instead, I drove to the one place I knew I would be safe, the one person who had never lied to me. Delia's apartment was above the diner, accessed by an exterior staircase that groaned under my weight as I climbed. She opened the door before I could knock, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without a word. For the next hour, she listened while I told her everything. The messages on Marcus's watch, the conversation at the gala, the anonymous email with its devastating attachments. She read the Operation Thornton document twice, her face growing grimmer with each page. When she finished, she set down the papers and poured herself 3 fingers of whiskey. "I would offer you some," she said, "but the baby probably would not appreciate it." Despite everything, I almost laughed. Delia took a long drink, set down her glass, and looked at me with the same no-nonsense expression I remembered from childhood. "So," she said, "what are you going to do?" "I do not know," I admitted. "My first instinct is to confront him. Throw these papers in his face and tell him I know everything." Delia shook her head. "That is your worst move. Right now you have the element of surprise. He does not know you know. The second you tip your hand, he starts covering his tracks, destroying evidence, getting his story straight with that Victoria woman. You need to keep quiet until you have a plan." She was right. I knew she was right. But the thought of going home to Marcus, of lying beside him in our bed, of letting him touch me and pretend to love me, made my skin crawl. "What kind of plan?" I asked. Delia refilled her whiskey and considered the question. "The way I see it, you have 2 choices. Option 1, you try to fight this alone. You hire a lawyer with your own money, you gather evidence, you take him to court. But honey, let us be realistic. You do not have the resources to go up against someone who has been planning this for 4 years. He has probably hidden assets, prepared contingencies, bought off people who might help you. Fighting alone is noble, but it is also stupid." I bristled at that. "I have managed on my own for 10 years, Delia. I built a successful business without my father's help." "And that is admirable," she agreed. "But this is not business. This is war. And in war, you need allies. You need resources. You need firepower." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Which brings me to option 2. You call your father." "No." The refusal was automatic, visceral. "I will not go crawling back to him." "Why not?" "Because I spent 10 years proving I do not need him. Because he was not there when my mother died. Because asking him for help means admitting I failed, that I could not make it on my own." Delia made a sound that was half sigh, half growl. "Elena Grace." "Thornton," she said, using my full name the way she used to when I was a child caught in some mischief. "I love you like you were my own daughter, so I am going to tell you something you do not want to hear." She grabbed my hands and held them tight. "Your pride is going to cost you your child. Is proving a point to your father really more important than protecting your baby?" The words hit me like a slap. I wanted to argue. I wanted to defend myself, but I could not, because she was right. Marcus had spent 4 years preparing for this. He had money, lawyers, connections, and a partner who was just as ruthless as he was. I had a design business, $30,000 in savings, and a belly full of baby. If I tried to fight him alone, I would lose, and losing meant losing my daughter. "Sometimes swallowing your pride is the appetizer to the main course of revenge," Delia said softly. "Call your father, Elena. Let him help you. You do not have to forgive him. You do not have to reconcile. But let him give you the weapons you need to win this war." I stayed at Delia's that night. I texted Marcus that I was not feeling well and was staying with a friend. He replied with concerned emojis and promises to take care of me when I got home. The hypocrisy made me nauseous. In the morning, I borrowed Delia's car and drove to a park by the river. I sat on a bench overlooking the water and watched the sun rise over Austin, the city where I had built my life, the city where I had fallen in love and gotten married and gotten pregnant, the city where everything I thought I knew had turned out to be lies. My phone felt heavy in my hand as I pulled up my father's number, a number I had not dialed in a decade. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I almost hung up. I almost let pride win one more time. Then my daughter kicked, and I remembered why I was doing this. Hello? My father's voice was older than I remembered, rougher around the edges, but still unmistakably William Thornton. Dad? I said. And then I could not say anything else because I was crying too hard. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Elena? His voice cracked on my name. Elena, is that really you? Dad? I managed. I need help. I am sorry. I expected questions. I expected recriminations. I expected him to remind me of all the terrible things I had said when I left, all the ways I had hurt him by cutting him out of my life. Instead, he said, "Where are you? I will send a car. I will send 10 cars. Whatever you need." I shook my head, even though he could not see me. "I am not asking you to save me," I said. "I am asking for resources to save myself." There is a difference. There was a long pause. When he spoke again, I could hear him smiling through the tears. "You sound just like your mother," he said. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about Marcus and Victoria, about the Operation Thornton document, about the 4 years of deception and the plan to use my baby as a bargaining chip for my inheritance. When I finished, my father was quiet for a long moment. I could hear him breathing, processing. Then he said something that nearly stopped my heart. "Elena, there is something you need to know. I have had security watching over you for years. I know about Marcus. I have known he was wrong for you since you started dating him." The anger came rushing back. "You knew? You knew this whole time and you did not warn me? Would you have believed me?" he asked. "If I had shown up 3 years ago with evidence that your perfect boyfriend was a con artist, would you have listened? Or would you have assumed I was trying to manipulate you, trying to control your life, trying to prove that you could not survive without me?" I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him he should have tried anyway, but I knew he was right. 3 years ago, I would have defended Marcus with everything I had. I would have accused my father of fabricating evidence. I would have cut off contact completely. I would have married Marcus anyway, and probably ended up in an even worse position than I was in now. "I made a lot of mistakes when you were growing up," my father continued. "I was not there for your mother the way I should have been. I was not there for you. When you left, after her funeral, I understood why. I deserved it." His voice broke. "But I never stopped loving you, Elena, and I never stopped watching over you. I have been waiting 10 years for you to be ready to let me back in." I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. "I am ready now," I said, "but I need you to understand something. I want to lead this fight. I make the decisions. I execute the strategy. You provide support, but you do not take over. Can you live with that?" Another pause. Then, "I can live with that. Then here is what I need," I said, and I started listing everything: lawyers, investigators, financial support, access to intelligence resources. My father listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "You will have everything by tomorrow morning. I will have Catherine Park call you. She is the best family law attorney in Texas, probably the country." "Thank you," I said. And then, because it needed to be said, "We are going to need to talk about everything else eventually. About Mom, about why I left, about all the years between then and now." "I know," he said, "but first, let us win this war." I hung up the phone and sat there for a while, watching the river flow past. The morning was warm, birds sang in the trees overhead. Austin was waking up around me, oblivious to the fact that my entire life had just shifted on its axis. I had spent 10 years running from my father, from his money, from his name, from everything he represented. Now I was going back. Not because I had forgiven him, not because the old wounds had healed, but because my daughter needed me to win. And winning required weapons I did not have on my own. Sometimes swallowing your pride is the appetizer to the main course of revenge. I was ready for the main course. My father's resources arrived the next morning, just as he promised. Catherine Park called me at 7 a.m. sharp. She was the founding partner of Park & Associates, a boutique family law firm that specialized in high-asset divorces. Her client list included senators, tech moguls, and at least 2 members of the British royal family. "Mrs. Hayes," she said, her voice crisp and professional, "your father has briefed me on your situation. I want you to know that my team and I are committed to protecting you and your child. But I need you to understand something from the outset. This will not be easy. Your husband has had years to prepare. We are starting from behind." "I understand," I told her, "but I have something he does not expect." "What is that?" "I know the truth, and he does not know I know." Catherine was quiet for a moment, then she laughed, a short, sharp sound of approval. "Good," she said. "That is exactly the attitude we need. Here's what happens next." She laid out the plan. First, we would gather evidence independently without tipping off Marcus. Then we would file for divorce, citing adultery and financial fraud. Simultaneously, we would petition for emergency custody based on documented evidence of Marcus's deception. The goal, Catherine explained, is to hit him with everything at once, before he has time to react or counter. We want the judge to see the full scope of his betrayal in a single, overwhelming presentation. It sounded good in theory, but theory and reality are different things. Over the next 2 weeks, I learned just how thoroughly Marcus had prepared. The first catastrophic blow came when I went to the bank to access our joint savings account. I needed liquid funds that Marcus could not track, money I could use for investigators and court fees, and whatever else the fight required. There was $280,000 in that account. Money I had contributed from my business over 3 years of marriage. My money, my work, my success. The bank manager, a nervous young man in an ill-fitting suit, could not meet my eyes when he delivered the news. "I am sorry, Mrs. Hayes," he said. "Your husband transferred all funds to a business account yesterday. You are not listed as a signatory on that account. There is nothing I can do." Yesterday. Marcus had moved the money yesterday, which meant he knew something was happening. Someone had tipped him off. I walked out of the bank with $3,400 to my name. The second blow came 3 days later. My biggest client was a boutique hotel developer named Sandra Chen. We had been working together for 18 months on a major project, transforming a historic building in downtown Austin into a luxury hotel. The contract was worth $400,000. It was the cornerstone of my business plan for the next 2 years. Sandra called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Her voice was strained. "Elena, I am so sorry," she said. "I have to cancel our contract." "What? Why, someone sent our board screenshots of financial irregularities from your business accounts. They are saying you are under investigation for fraud. The board cannot risk associating with someone who might be facing criminal charges." "Sandra, that is not true. I have never committed fraud. Someone is lying to your board." "I believe you," Sandra said, "but perception matters more than truth in this business." My hands are tied. She hung up, and I understood what was happening. Marcus was not waiting for me to make the first move. He was destroying me preemptively, salting the earth so thoroughly that no one would believe me when I finally came forward with the truth. The fraud allegations spread through Austin's design community like wildfire. Within a week, I had lost 3 more clients. My phone stopped ringing. Emails went unanswered. The career I had spent 10 years building was crumbling around me. The third blow was the worst of all. At my 32-week checkup, my doctor found dangerously elevated blood pressure. The numbers were high enough to make her frown and order additional tests. "Mrs. Hayes," she said carefully, "the way doctors speak when they are trying not to scare you. Your blood pressure is in a range that concerns me. We are looking at possible preeclampsia, which can be very serious for both you and the baby." I gripped the edges of the exam table. "What does that mean?" "It means you need to eliminate stress from your life immediately. Complete bed rest if possible. Minimal physical activity. No emotional upheaval." She looked at me with kind, worried eyes. "Your body is under extreme pressure. If things do not improve in the next few weeks, we may have to deliver the baby early." At 32 weeks, she would probably survive, but there would be complications. Every day she stays inside, you improves her chances significantly. I nodded numbly. Eliminate stress. Avoid emotional upheaval. As if that were possible, when my entire life was being systematically destroyed. After the appointment, I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot for over an hour. I had no money. My business was in ruins. My husband was 3 steps ahead of me at every turn. And now my body was failing me too. My daughter's life was at risk because I could not keep myself calm enough to carry her safely. I had never felt so helpless, so alone, so utterly defeated. I drove to Delia's diner on autopilot. She took one look at me and closed the restaurant early. In her apartment upstairs, she listened to everything. The stolen money, the destroyed reputation, the health complications. When I finished, she slid a piece of pie across the table. "Honey," she said, "you look like 10 miles of dirt road on a rainy day." I managed a weak smile. "He took everything. I have nothing left." Delia sat back and crossed her arms. "You have a baby," she said. "You have me. And now you have your father and his army of lawyers. You have more than you think." "But he is winning," I said. "Every move I make, he is already 2 steps ahead. It is like he knows exactly what I am going to do before I do it." Delia considered this. "Then stop doing what he expects," she said simply. "What do you mean?" "I mean you have been playing defense this whole time, reacting to his moves instead of making your own. That is exactly what he wants. He wants you scared and scrambling and making mistakes. He wants you to feel like you have already lost." She leaned forward. "But here's the thing about wars, Elena. The person who stays calm controls the battlefield. He expects you to panic. He expects you to lash out. He has probably got cameras or spies or something watching for any sign that you know the truth." I thought about that. About the way my bank had been cleaned out within days of my first meeting with Catherine Park. About the fraud allegations that had started circulating right after I contacted my father. Someone was watching me. Someone was reporting my moves to Marcus. "What do I do?" I asked. "You stop giving them anything to report," Delia said. "You go home, you act normal. You let Marcus think he has won, and meanwhile, your father's people do the work. They gather the evidence. They build the case. And when the time is right, you hit him with everything at once, before he even knows what is happening." It was good advice. Hard advice, but good. That night, I went home. I apologized to Marcus for being distant and stressed. I blamed pregnancy hormones and health concerns. I let him hold me and comfort me and promise that everything would be okay. And all the while, behind my careful mask of compliance, I was planning his destruction. The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life. On the surface, everything returned to normal. Marcus and I ate dinner together. We watched television on the couch. We talked about baby names and nursery furniture and all the mundane details of preparing for a child. Every conversation was torture. Every touch made my skin crawl. But I smiled and nodded and played the part of a devoted wife because that was what the plan required. Meanwhile, my father's team was working. Connor Reeves was a private investigator my father had used for years. Former military, with a face like weathered leather and eyes that missed nothing. He led a team of 4, and within 2 weeks, they had compiled a devastating case against Marcus. Time-stamped hotel footage showing Marcus and Victoria entering suites together. Credit card receipts tracing their affair back 3 years. Text messages recovered from cloud backups that detailed their plans in their own words. But the most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source, Victoria herself. Not voluntarily, of course, but it turned out that Victoria Sinclair was not as careful with her digital security as she should have been. Connor's team gained access to her personal laptop through means I did not ask about and did not want to know. On that laptop, they found everything. The original Operation Thornton document, with Marcus's handwritten notes in the margins. Recordings of conversations between Marcus and Victoria discussing their plans. Email threads detailing which judges in Austin might be susceptible to bribes. Financial records showing money being funneled to offshore accounts. It was more than enough to destroy Marcus in court, but Catherine Park wanted to be sure. "We are only going to get one shot at this," she told me in one of our many strategy sessions. "If we file for divorce and he manages to wriggle out, he will be on guard forever. We need to make the case so overwhelming that no judge in the world could rule in his favor." So we waited. We gathered more evidence. We documented every lie Marcus told, every meeting he took with Victoria, every dollar that moved through his suspicious offshore accounts. The hardest part was the waiting. My due date crept closer. My blood pressure remained dangerously elevated despite the bed rest. Every day was a battle to stay calm, to keep my stress levels low enough that my body could keep my daughter safe for just a little longer. Marcus noticed that I was not myself. He asked constantly if something was wrong. I blamed it on the pregnancy, on worry about the birth, on first-time mother nerves. He accepted every excuse without question, because he was too confident, too certain that his plan was proceeding exactly as intended. That overconfidence would be his downfall. The divorce filing happened on a Thursday morning in October. I was 36 weeks pregnant, enormous and uncomfortable, and running on pure determination. Catherine Park filed simultaneously in 3 different courts: a divorce petition citing adultery and financial fraud, an emergency custody motion based on documented evidence of Marcus's deception, and a request for a forensic audit of all Hayes Innovations finances. At the same time, Connor Reeves delivered a carefully curated evidence package to the business editor of the Austin American-Statesman. Not all the evidence. Just enough to raise questions. Just enough to start the drumbeat of scandal that would follow Marcus for the rest of his life. The first Marcus heard about any of it was when the process server knocked on the door of Hayes Innovations headquarters. I wish I could have seen his face. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. I spent those 2 weeks on strict bed rest, barely moving from the guest room at my father's estate. My doctor visited daily to check my blood pressure. Catherine Park visited every other day to prepare me for what was coming. Marcus tried to contact me constantly: phone calls, texts, emails. He showed up at my father's gate twice, demanding to speak to me. I refused all contact. Everything went through lawyers. The hearing itself was held in a small courtroom on the 3rd floor of the Travis County Courthouse. Marcus sat at one table with his legal team. I sat at the other with Catherine Park. It was the first time I had seen my husband since I left our house 3 weeks earlier. He looked tired, thinner than I remembered. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled. Good, I thought. Let him feel what I felt. Let him know what it is like to watch your life fall apart. Catherine presented our case methodically. The hotel footage played on a large screen, showing Marcus and Victoria entering room after room over a period of months. The financial records scrolled past, highlighting suspicious transfers and unexplained expenses. The Operation Thornton document was introduced into evidence, with expert testimony confirming that the handwriting was Marcus's. Through it all, Marcus's face grew paler and paler. His lawyers objected constantly, trying to suppress evidence, trying to claim privacy violations, trying anything they could think of to stop the avalanche of proof burying their client. But Catherine had been careful. Every piece of evidence had been gathered within the bounds of the law. Every document had a clear chain of custody. Every recording had been legally obtained. The judge listened to everything with a neutral expression. When both sides had finished presenting, she called a brief recess to review the materials. Those 15 minutes were the longest of my life. When she returned, the judge looked directly at Marcus. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "the evidence of marital misconduct presented here today is substantial and well documented. The court is deeply troubled by the apparent scope and duration of the deception perpetrated against Mrs. Hayes." She turned to me. "Mrs. Hayes, I am granting your petition for emergency sole custody of your unborn child. I am also freezing all joint assets pending a full investigation of the financial irregularities raised in these proceedings." I started crying. I could not help it. After weeks of fear and stress and uncertainty, the relief was overwhelming. Furthermore, the judge continued, "This court is making a criminal referral to the district attorney's office regarding the evidence of fraud presented today. Mr. Hayes, I strongly advise you to retain criminal defense counsel immediately." Marcus's face went white. His lawyers huddled around him, whispering urgently. I did not care what they were saying. I had won. Later that night, Delia hosted a small celebration at her apartment. Just me, her, Connor, Catherine, and my father. We ate pie and drank sparkling cider and talked about everything except the case. For the first time in months, I let myself believe that the nightmare was over. I should have known better. 72 hours after the hearing, I was served with new papers. I was at my father's estate, resting in the guest room with my feet up, when the process server arrived at the gate. Security brought the documents to me personally. I read them 3 times before the words sank in. Marcus was not appealing the divorce. He was not fighting the custody ruling. He was doing something much, much worse. He had filed a paternity challenge. The documents claimed that the baby I was carrying might not be his. They demanded genetic testing. They alleged that I had been having an affair throughout our marriage. It was a lie, of course. A transparent, desperate lie. Marcus knew perfectly well that the baby was his. He had planned her conception. He had tracked my ovulation cycles. He had documented everything. But the truth did not matter. What mattered was delay, complication, confusion. While the paternity challenge wound its way through the courts, Marcus could claim he was being denied access to a child who might not even be his. He could paint himself as the victim of a vindictive wife making false accusations. And that was not all. Attached to the paternity challenge was a motion claiming that I suffered from mental instability. The motion cited my estrangement from my father as evidence of troubled family relationships. It included statements from Hayes Innovations employees who claimed to have witnessed erratic and paranoid behavior from me at company events. It even included notes from a therapist I had seen twice during my first trimester, notes that had been obtained through means that were almost certainly illegal. The therapist's notes described normal first trimester anxiety, worry about miscarriage, concern about body changes, completely typical feelings for any pregnant woman. But stripped of context, presented alongside the other allegations, they painted a picture of a woman who was emotionally unstable, unfit to raise a child. Catherine called me as soon as she heard. "He is trying to change the narrative," she said. The divorce ruling was devastating for him. The criminal referral terrified him. "This is his counterattack." "But it is all lies," I said. "None of it is true." "I know," Catherine replied, "and we can prove that. But it takes time, and time is what he is buying." She was right. That afternoon, the story hit the Austin news. Someone had leaked the paternity challenge to the press. "Thornton heiress in bitter divorce," the headline screamed. "Father of baby questioned. Mental stability at issue." My secret identity was blown. For 10 years, I had carefully maintained the illusion that I was Elena Grace, self-made interior designer, with no connection to the Thornton fortune. Now everyone knew the truth. The comments on the news articles were brutal. Half of them called me a gold digger who had finally been exposed. The other half called me a crazy, pregnant woman who had invented accusations against her successful husband. The stress hit me like a physical blow. That night, I started having contractions, real ones, strong ones. 5 minutes apart, then 4, then 3. At 34 weeks, I was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. For 6 terrifying hours, the doctors worked to stop my labor. They pumped me full of medication. They hooked me up to monitors. They spoke in hushed, urgent voices while my father paced the hallway and Delia held my hand. Finally, just before dawn, the contractions stopped. My daughter stayed where she was, safe inside me, at least for now. But the damage was done. My doctor sat beside my bed as the sun rose over Austin. "Mrs. Thornton," she said, and it still felt strange to hear that name after so many years. "You are at very high risk for early labor. Any additional stress could trigger contractions again. If that happens, we may not be able to stop them next time." She looked at me with kind, exhausted eyes. "I know you are in the middle of something difficult. I do not know the details, and I do not need to. But for your daughter's sake, you need to find a way to stay calm. Whatever is happening out there, it cannot matter more than keeping this baby safe." I nodded. I understood, but understanding and doing are different things. When they go low, they want you to go lower. They want you to scream and cry and lash out publicly. They want you to give them ammunition to use against you. But here's the truth about wars. The person who stays calm controls the battlefield. The person who lets emotion drive their decisions is already losing. Marcus wanted me to panic. He wanted me to make mistakes. He wanted to provoke me into behavior that would support his narrative of mental instability. I would not give him that satisfaction. Over the next few weeks, I stayed in my father's guest room. I did not give interviews. I did not respond to the media coverage. I did not engage with the social media firestorm that swirled around my name. I let Catherine Park handle everything. And slowly, methodically, she began to dismantle Marcus's counterattack. The paternity challenge was thrown out after 3 weeks. Our lawyers presented Marcus's own documents from Operation Thornton, which included detailed records of my ovulation cycles and conception dates. The judge was not amused by the attempt to claim uncertainty about paternity when Marcus had literally planned the pregnancy. The mental instability motion took longer. But Catherine found the employees who had submitted statements against me. Under deposition, 2 of them admitted they had been pressured by Victoria Sinclair to provide false testimony. A third revealed that he had been promised a promotion in exchange for his statement. One by one, the pillars of Marcus's counterattack crumbled, but victory was not quite as close as I thought. My daughter was born on a Tuesday morning in October. She came 5 weeks early, despite our best efforts to keep her inside longer. My water broke at 3 a.m., and by 9 a.m., I was holding her in my arms. She weighed 6 pounds, 2 ounces. She had 10 fingers and 10 toes and a full head of dark hair. Her cry was strong and healthy, filling the delivery room with the sound of new life. I named her Lily Grace. No haze anywhere in her name. When the nurse placed her in my arms for the first time, everything else fell away. The divorce, the media coverage, the legal battles. None of it mattered in that moment. There was just her, this tiny, perfect person who had fought so hard to exist. "I am going to protect you," I whispered against her downy head, "no matter what it costs me, no matter what I have to do. You are safe now, I promise." She wrapped her impossibly small fingers around my thumb and promptly fell asleep. For 2 hours, I existed in a bubble of perfect peace. Then Marcus arrived. He appeared in the maternity ward hallway with a massive bouquet of flowers and a camera top crew conveniently stationed nearby. He told the nurses he just wanted to meet his daughter. He told security he had a right to see his own child. When hospital staff tried to remove him, he made sure the cameras captured every moment. The concerned father, the vindictive ex-wife, the heartbreaking image of a man being denied access to his newborn baby. The photos were all over social media within the hour. "Loving father denied access to newborn by bitter ex," read the headlines. I wanted to scream. I wanted to explain to everyone that this man had planned to steal my child, that he had spent years deceiving me, that he was not a loving father, but a predator in a nice suit. But Catherine had warned me this might happen. She had prepared me. "Do not engage," she said. "Do not give them anything. Let him play to the cameras. Let him create his narrative. We will destroy it in court." So I focused on my daughter, on learning to breastfeed, on recovering from the delivery, on falling in love with this tiny person who had somehow emerged from the wreckage of my failed marriage. Lily was 2 days old when Connor Reeves came to visit with news that changed everything. "I found out who sent you that anonymous email," he said. "The one with the Operation Thornton document." I looked up from where Lily was nursing against my chest. "Who?" "Victoria Sinclair." I did not understand. Why would she expose her own plan? Because the plan changed. Connor sat down across from me, his weathered face serious. "About 6 months ago, Victoria discovered that Marcus was planning to double-cross her. He was going to reconcile with you after the baby was born. Cut Victoria out completely. Use the marriage to access your inheritance instead of the divorce." I tried to process this. Marcus was going to betray Victoria the way he had betrayed me, Connor nodded. She found evidence on his laptop, a separate plan he had been developing in secret. Operation Sinclair, he called it. It detailed how he would dispose of Victoria once she was no longer useful. So, when Victoria found out, she decided to burn everything down. Exactly. If she could not have the Thornton money, neither could Marcus. She sent you that email to blow up his plan before he could dispose of her. It made a horrible kind of sense. Victoria and Marcus were both predators. And when predators turn on each other, everyone around them gets hurt. "There is more," Connor said. "Victoria has reached out through intermediaries. She wants to meet with you. Why? She is willing to testify against Marcus. She has the original documents, with his handwriting. She has recordings of conversations where he discusses bribing judges. She has evidence of financial crimes that could put him away for years. And she is offering all of this out of the goodness of her heart? Connor's face was grim. She wants immunity, protection from prosecution for her role in the scheme, and she wants to make sure Marcus goes down harder than she does. I looked at my sleeping daughter, at her tiny fist curled against her cheek, at the flutter of her breath. Victoria had helped plan the theft of this child. She had discussed using my baby as leverage. She had referred to me as an asset, a mark, a target. Every instinct I had screamed against working with her, but every instinct had also told me Marcus was a good man, and look where that had gotten me. Set up the meeting, I said. Connor nodded. That is what I thought you would say. The meeting took place in a conference room at Catherine Park's law firm. Neutral ground. Lawyers present on both sides. Victoria looked different than I remembered. The confident, predatory woman from the charity gala was gone. In her place was someone who looked hunted, scared, like the prey she had always been and was only now realizing it. She sat across the table from me, her hands folded in front of her, her eyes darting between me and the lawyers flanking her. I know you hate me, she said. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the strain underneath. I deserve it. I helped plan your destruction. I slept with your husband. I talked about using your baby as a bargaining chip. She met my eyes. But Marcus was going to destroy both of us. The difference is that you have resources to stop him. All I have is information. I stared at her for a long moment. Why should I believe anything you say? Victoria slid a folder across the table. Because I have the original Operation Thornton file, his handwriting in the margins, his signature on the planning documents. I have recordings of him discussing which judges in Travis County might be susceptible to bribes. I have evidence he has been funneling company money to offshore accounts for 3 years. She leaned forward. I will give you everything, Elena. Every piece of evidence I have. I will testify under oath about every conversation, every plan, every crime I witnessed or participated in. I will help you destroy him completely, and in exchange, immunity for the financial crimes. I will not serve time for what I did. That was the deal. Work with the woman who had helped plan my destruction, or fight Marcus alone with half the evidence. I thought about my daughter, about what was best for her, about what I needed to do to make sure she would never be used as a pawn in someone else's game. I signed the immunity agreement. Later that night, I told Delia what I had done. Her eyebrows nearly reached her hairline. You teamed up with the side piece, she said. The enemy of my enemy, I replied. Delia shook her head. Honey, in my experience, the enemy of my enemy is usually just another enemy who has not stabbed me yet. Watch your back. I intended to. The final custody hearing took place in November. Lily was 6 weeks old, healthy and thriving despite her early arrival. I had not slept more than 3 hours at a stretch since she was born, but I was ready. Catherine Park presented our case with the precision of a surgeon and the ferocity of a predator. Every piece of evidence was perfectly positioned. Every witness was thoroughly prepared. Victoria took the stand first. She testified for 4 hours. She described how she and Marcus had met 6 years ago, how they had developed the plan to target wealthy women with complicated family situations, how I had been selected as the ideal mark. She described the years of deception, the staged meet cute at the coffee shop, the carefully orchestrated romance, the calculated proposal under the stars at Big Bend. She described how they had tracked my fertility cycles, how they had timed Marcus's presence in our bed to maximize the chances of conception, how they had celebrated when I got pregnant. Through it all, Marcus sat at the defense table with his face carefully blank. But I could see his hands trembling. I could see the sweat beading at his temples. He knew it was over. After Victoria finished, Catherine introduced the physical evidence. The Operation Thornton document with Marcus's handwritten notes. The offshore account records traced through 4 different countries. The recordings of Marcus discussing which judges could be bribed. Then came the forensic accountant who explained in devastating detail how Marcus had been stealing from Hayes Innovations for years. The company that had made him famous was built on fraud. Finally, Catherine called me to the stand. I testified for 2 hours. I described my marriage from my perspective, the small red flags I had ignored, the gradual isolation from friends and family, the constant gaslighting that made me doubt my own perceptions. I described finding the messages on Marcus's watch. I described what I heard at the charity gala. I described the devastating moment when I opened that anonymous email and learned that my entire life was a lie. By the time I finished, several members of the courtroom gallery were crying. Marcus's lawyers did their best. They cross-examined me aggressively, trying to paint me as unstable and paranoid. They suggested that Victoria was lying to save herself. They claimed the evidence had been fabricated or obtained illegally. None of it worked. The judge took 3 hours to deliberate. When she returned, her face was stern. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "in my 20 years on the bench, I have never seen a more thoroughly documented case of marital fraud. Your conduct is not merely grounds for divorce. It is grounds for criminal prosecution." She turned to me. "Mrs. Thornton, I am granting your petition for divorce. I am awarding you full custody of the minor child with no visitation rights for Mr. Hayes, pending the outcome of criminal proceedings. I am also ordering Mr. Hayes to pay $3.2 million in damages for financial fraud and intentional infliction of emotional distress." She looked back at Marcus. "Furthermore, this court is making an immediate criminal referral to the district attorney's office. I am recommending charges of wire fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy. Bailiffs, please take Mr. Hayes into custody." I watched as my husband was handcuffed and led out of the courtroom. His lawyers protested. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Marcus looked back at me once, just before he disappeared through the door. For a moment, I saw something in his eyes that might have been regret, or it might have been calculation. With Marcus, it was impossible to tell. Then he was gone. Outside the courthouse, I held Lily against my chest as the media swarmed around us. Catherine stood at my side, fielding questions with practiced ease. A reporter shoved a microphone in my face. "Mrs. Thornton, how do you feel about the verdict?" I looked down at my daughter, at her tiny face, peaceful in sleep despite the chaos around us, at the life I'd fought so hard to protect. "I feel ready to move forward," I said. That was all. No gloating, no victory speech, no dramatic pronouncements. I had won. My daughter was safe. That was enough. That night, my father hosted a celebration at his estate. The same house I had fled 10 years ago. The same rooms where my mother had laughed and loved and eventually died. It looked different now, warmer. Or maybe I was different. My father held Lily for the first time that night. He cried openly, not bothering to hide the tears streaming down his weathered face. "She looks like your mother," he said, around the eyes. "I know," I replied. We sat together in his study, Lily sleeping between us, and talked for hours about the past, about the years we had lost, about all the ways we had hurt each other. "I am sorry," he said at one point, "for not being there when she died, for not being the father you needed." "I know," I said again, "and I am sorry for cutting you out, for punishing you instead of trying to heal." He reached over and took my hand. "We cannot change the past," he said, "but maybe we can do better going forward." I nodded. I would like that. I went to bed that night feeling something I had not felt in years. Hope. But hope, I would learn, is a dangerous thing. It makes you forget that the battle is not over until the last soldier falls. The victory lasted exactly 1 week. Then Connor called with news that made my blood freeze. Victoria is gone, he said, without preamble. Her apartment is empty. Her accounts are closed. She disappeared 3 days ago. I sat down heavily. What do you mean, gone? I mean, she packed up everything and vanished. No forwarding address, no goodbye, just gone. But she testified. She gave us everything. She gave us enough to destroy Marcus. Connor agreed, but she was also building an exit strategy the whole time. $4 million is missing from the accounts she had access to during the discovery process. $4 million. Victoria had played us. She had used me to destroy Marcus, then disappeared with everything she could steal before anyone noticed. But there is more, Connor said. His voice was grim. The night before his arrest, Marcus transferred the deed to your house, the one you designed, the one you paid for. It is in his mother's name now. You cannot touch it. I closed my eyes. My house, the craftsman I had restored with my own hands, the garden where I had planted roses in memory of my mother, the nursery I had designed for a daughter who would never sleep there, gone. The $3.2 million judgment, I said. Please tell me that is not gone too. Connor was silent for a long moment. Marcus filed for bankruptcy 2 days ago. His assets are tied up in legal proceedings that will take years to resolve. The forensic accountants found accounts in 6 different countries, but most of them are already empty. Victoria probably took that money too. I pressed my hand to my forehead. So what you are telling me is that I won the case but lost everything else. Marcus is in jail, but he took my money and my house. Victoria testified against him, but she stole $4 million and disappeared. And the judgment I was awarded is worthless because there is nothing left to collect. That about sums it up, Connor said quietly. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time. Lily was asleep in her bassinet beside me. I watched her breathe, in and out, the steady rhythm of new life. I had won the legal battle. Marcus was facing 7 years in federal prison. His reputation was destroyed. His company had collapsed. His face was all over the news as an example of what happens when ambition curdles into criminality. But Victoria had escaped with millions. My house was gone. The money I was owed would probably never materialize. In the cold calculus of victory and defeat, it was hard to say who had actually won. Delia came by that afternoon. She listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, she sat beside me on the couch and took my hand. You know what my grandmother used to say? She asked. What? She used to say that the only real victory is getting up tomorrow and trying again. That does not feel like victory, I said. That feels like exhaustion. Delia squeezed my hand. Maybe, but you know what? You are still here. Lily is healthy. Marcus is in prison. And you have something he will never have. What is that? A chance to start over. A chance to build something real instead of something stolen. I thought about that for a long time after she left. Sometimes you win and you still lose. That is not failure. That is reality. The legal system is not justice. It is the best approximation of justice that imperfect humans can create. Real victory is not in court documents or bank accounts. Real victory is who you become after the war is over. The months that followed were hard. Harder than the divorce, in some ways. I had to rebuild everything from scratch. My business had been destroyed by the fraud allegations Marcus had spread. My savings were gone. My reputation was in tatters. But I had something I did not have before. I had my father. Imperfect and complicated, but present. I had Delia. Wise and fierce and always ready with pie and hard truths. I had Connor, who became a friend as well as an investigator. And I had Lily. She was the reason I got up every morning when getting up felt impossible. She was the reason I kept fighting when surrender seemed easier. I used my story to build something new. The Texas Monthly article came out 6 months after the verdict. 10,000 words about financial abuse in marriage, about gaslighting and control and the slow erosion of self that happens when someone you trust is systematically dismantling your life. The article went viral. Thousands of emails poured in from women across the country, women who had been through similar situations, women who were still trapped, women who just wanted to say thank you for telling the truth. That was how the Grace Foundation started. It began small, just me in a borrowed office, helping women navigate the legal and financial complexities of leaving abusive relationships. Free consultations, pro bono legal referrals. Help opening bank accounts in their own names. Within a year, we had helped over 1,000 women. Within 3 years, we had offices in 7 states. The work was not glamorous. It did not make me rich. Most days, it was heartbreaking and exhausting and felt like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. But it mattered. Every woman who escaped, every child who was protected, every family that found a way forward. That was victory, the real kind, the kind that could not be measured in court documents or bank accounts. Lily took her first steps on a Tuesday afternoon in the middle of my office. She had been crawling around the floor while I took a phone call, and suddenly, she pulled herself up on a chair and walked 3 steps toward me. I screamed so loudly that my assistant came running. By the time she was 2, Lily had forgotten that she ever had a father named Marcus. She called my dad Grandpa and climbed all over him whenever he visited. She called Delia Auntie D and demanded pie at every opportunity. She called Connor Uncle Con and made him wear tiaras during tea parties. She called me Mama, always Mama, from her first word to her last, every single day. That was all I needed. The letter arrived on a Thursday, 3 years after the divorce. Prison postmark, Marcus's handwriting. I almost threw it away without reading it. What could he possibly say that would matter now? But something made me open it. Elena, I know you have no reason to read this. I am not writing to ask for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I want you to know that when I met you, before I knew your name or your family, I did love you. Not enough to be a good man, not enough to choose you over my ambition, but I loved you. That makes what I did worse. Not better. I know that. The night you told me you were pregnant, I almost confessed everything. For about 30 seconds, I thought about walking away from the plan, from Victoria, from all of it, but I was too afraid to lose the life I thought I deserved. You did not destroy me, Elena. I destroyed myself. You just showed me the mirror. I hope Lily never knows who I am. She deserves a better story than the truth. Marcus, I read the letter once. I did not cry. I did not feel anger or satisfaction or vindication. I felt nothing at all. For so long, Marcus had occupied such a massive space in my life. The villain, the betrayer, the architect of my destruction. But reading his words now, he seemed small, pathetic. A man who had every opportunity to be good and chose to be cruel instead. A man who would spend years in a prison cell, thinking about the life he threw away. I folded the letter and placed it in a box. I wrote on the lid, with a black marker, things that do not define me. Then I put the box in my closet, next to my old wedding ring and a copy of Operation Thornton. And I went to play with my daughter. That is what victory looks like. Not revenge, not punishment, not getting even, just moving forward, building something real, becoming someone you are proud of. They thought they were taking everything from me, my money, my home, my reputation, my sanity, but you cannot take what someone is willing to lose. I lost my husband, but he was never really mine to begin with. I lost my house, but I built a new one. I lost my reputation, but I earned a better one. I lost my savings, but I learned that money cannot buy safety, or love, or peace. And in exchange for all of that loss, here's what I found. I found my daughter, my father, my purpose, my power. I would make that trade again every single day. If you are listening to this story and you see yourself in my words, I want you to know something. You are not crazy. Your gut feelings are valid. The patterns you have noticed. The unease you cannot quite explain. Trust those instincts. And if you are already in the thick of it, if you are fighting a battle that seems impossible to win, I want you to know this. You are stronger than you think, braver than you feel, more capable than anyone has given you credit for. The people who hurt you want you to believe you are weak. They want you to doubt yourself. They want you to give up before you even start fighting. Do not give them that satisfaction. Fight. Even when it is hard, even when you lose battles along the way, even when the system seems designed to crush you. Fight because you deserve better. Fight because your children deserve to see a mother who does not accept abuse. Fight because somewhere in the future is a version of you who has made it through, who is standing on the other side of all this pain, who is living a life you cannot even imagine right now. That version of you is waiting. Do not make her wait forever. Matek. 1 in 3 women will experience some form of domestic abuse in their lifetime. Financial abuse, which includes controlling, stealing, or sabotaging a partner's money, affects 99% of all domestic violence cases. If you recognize yourself in Elena's story, know this. You are not alone. You are not crazy. And you are stronger than they want you to believe. National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233. Bistorasyam. Elena Thornton went on to expand the Grace Foundation to 15 states. She wrote a best-selling memoir and testified before Congress about the need for stronger financial abuse protections. Marcus Hayes was convicted of wire fraud and tax evasion. He served 7 years in federal prison. He died of a heart attack 6 months after his release, alone in a rented room in Nevada. Victoria Sinclair was apprehended in Costa Rica 18 months after she disappeared. She was extradited, tried, and convicted of grand theft. She is currently serving 12 years in a Texas state prison. Lily Grace Thornton graduated summa cum laude from the University of Texas with a degree in social work. She now serves as executive director of the Grace Foundation, working alongside her mother to help survivors of abuse build new lives. William Thornton passed away peacefully at the age of 78, surrounded by his daughter and granddaughter. He left the bulk of his fortune to the Grace Foundation, ensuring its work would continue for generations. Delia Washington retired from making pie at the age of 72. She moved into a cottage on the Thornton estate and spent her final years gardening, giving unsolicited advice, and spoiling Lily at every opportunity. She died in her sleep at 81, with a smile on her face. Connor. Reeves never did ask Elena on a proper date, but he was there every Sunday for dinner until the day he died. Some loves do not need to be named to be real. The story you just heard is fictional, but the experiences it describes are not. Financial abuse is real. Gaslighting is real. The systematic destruction of a person's confidence, finances, and sense of reality is real. If you or someone you know needs help, please reach out. There are people who want to support you. You just have to be brave enough to ask. One more thing before we start. If this story resonates with you, If it makes you feel something, if it helps you in any way, I would be so grateful if you could hit that like button. It helps more women find this message when they need it most. And if you have been through something similar, drop a comment below. Share your story. You never know who might read your words and realize they are not alone. If you are new here, consider subscribing and turning on notifications. Every week, we share stories about strong women who refuse to be broken, women who fought back, women who won. Your support helps us reach more people who need to hear these stories. Now, let us begin.